So we all know that religion is interesting, but what about important in your career? And I suspect I'm probably not the one to answer this question, because I liked it so much I never left. I just stayed there. They couldn't get rid of me. So we're not really primarily thinking about people who went on to get PhDs in religion. We've had quite a few of those, actually, or in the ministry. Not less frequently, but occasionally, going to rabbinical school or various kinds of ministry. But rather today, we'd like to hear from three people who went into fields, well, at least not obviously or directly connected with religion. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I've been told that I should designate who goes first. So I'm going to go with seniority of graduation, of course. Seniority of graduation, right? So that would be you, Jackie. Just to be clear, let's initially just say, you know, kind of your name and let's see, your name and your, you know, what you majored in and what year you graduated and kind of what your present situation is, and then we can go into a little bit more about narratives.
Sure. I'm Jacqueline Barbaro. I graduated from the college in 2006. I think I was technically only a religion major, but I cycled through and completed large parts of a theater minor, a women's studies minor, and a journalism major, and worked for the Wheel for a good long time. I am currently a nonprofit fundraiser and have worked in nonprofits since I graduated in 2006. I live in Boston, and there is a tiny toddler running around here somewhere.
Okay. How about you, Siley?
Hi, my name is Siley, and I graduated in 2019 May, and I also went to Oxford, so graduated Oxford in 2017. And so I double majored in anthropology, human biology, and religion. And I also went back and forth a lot and was super indecisive and was pre-med also, like, for a lot of the time. So like I can talk about a little bit about that too, and like the connections with religion and pre-med too, if anyone would like. And then I did AmeriCorps Vista for a year in Portland, and so I worked with Native communities and partners at a nonprofit that managed Medicaid and Medicare for Oregon. And so just mostly helped with like working to design and improve like tools, processes, and assist with conducting technical assistance there. And then currently I'm back in my home state of Indiana, and I'm working with the CDC Foundation as a disease intervention specialist. And so I'm assisting with the contact tracing and case investigation efforts for the tribes in Michigan.
Great. Blake?
Hi, everyone. I'm Blake Mays. I graduated from Emory College in 2014. I was a religion major with a community building and social change minor. After graduation, I did the Bobby Jones Scholarship at St. Andrews for a year, and then came back and worked for the Woodruff Foundation for a couple of years prior to law school. And now I live in Boston as well and work at Bain & Company here as a consultant.
Okay, all very interesting. Why don't we get started with a little bit more about kind of what got you into the religion major, and maybe a little bit more granular, is that the word? About kind of what you feel like you got out of the religion major that you still remember even now. But we do it in reverse order here. Blake.
Okay, sure. So I went to Emory very deeply interested in religion and came from a family of faith and had actually thought about joining a Catholic religious order upon graduation. But one of the first people that I met at Emory was Dr. Bobby Patterson, and took an initial kind of religion in America course with her and absolutely loved it. And she became my advisor, and one religion course turned into two, and then built from there. And I fell in love with the field and became a major that way. Kind of fell into it in some ways, but it also kind of always had an intellectual interest in the study of college, about 7 years. And to me, the parts of the religion major that have really stuck with me have been the ability to translate and speak to different vocabularies in a kind of very diverse world. I'm from a pretty conservative evangelical family in East Tennessee, and I think in the religion major, I really learned how to speak across religious traditions to various people, and kind of think about what's important to those various individuals, and that served me very well in my career, speaking to diverse stakeholder groups and helping to translate, especially in the legal field, people's concerns to various parties. Another thing that I think I've really taken away from it is kind of the practice of attention and learning how to sit with a text for a long time and think critically about it, move to kind of various levels of meaning, and then kind of articulate what that means. And that's something that in the legal field and in consulting, I do a lot of. And I thought that the religion major prepared me very well for that. And then lastly, I would say the religion major in many ways was kind of a study of empathy. You are asked to kind of look at these various religious traditions and enter into other people's shoes and think about what did they care about at the time and why did they develop this ritual or practice, and why did they respond to the other in this way. And that's something that I've found in just the mundane day-to-day of life. That kind of is the stuff of life in many ways, and being able to develop that kind of empathy muscle is something that stuck with me for a long time afterwards.
Great. Let's proceed, and then we have other questions too. But Saili.
For me, I wasn't going into college like thinking that I would pursue religious studies at all. Like at first I was thinking of NBB and just being pre-med, and then in high school and earlier on, I was like a part of a lot of interfaith dialogue and projects, and I grew up Hindu, so religion was something that I was around. But I think like once I started taking some anthropology and then religion courses, I think my freshman and sophomore year at Oxford, I really liked taking a lot of like the courses that Dr. Poole taught. I think it was like one of the Islam ones, but I really liked that one. And so that got me interested in considering religious studies. And for me, like, I don't think I had declared that as a major until my start of junior year. So I had mostly been looking at a lot of the classes that were offered under anthropology and under religion. And at first I was thinking of doing like a religion anthropology major. But then I realized that I wanted to take more courses. And so like, I thought that double majoring would be a better fit for me. And then I also had been wanting to go a more medical route. So I thought that like that combination of anthropology, human biology, and religion would make more sense for me. But I think what really kept me going in it was that I realized that I was really interested in theory. And I think it gave me a chance to learn from a lot of interdisciplinary perspectives, which is, I think, something that I've taken. And I think that's really useful for anything, for any job that you would do. And I think a lot of like the critical thinking that you learn emphasizes a lot about cultural humility, and then like contextualizing and looking at bottom up approaches to understand before you act. And I think that's really something that's been really useful in what I'm doing currently. So I think those are like the main things that I've taken away.
Mhm. And I believe you also took my religion in the body class. Is that right? I'm remembering that right. Yeah,
I'm
it's
forgetting.
crystal clear. I'm sure you're still practicing Tai Chi even today that we learned in that class. Jackie.
So I think I'm going to get a little bit more personal in addition to the professional. Um, because that's where a lot of what I learned as a religion major manifests these days. I wanted to be a religion major absolutely hardcore because I knew that I wanted to be a pastor. That was what I was going to do with my life. I also came from a conservative evangelical family, um, which became a little bit more difficult my freshman year when I came out as queer. But I had already declared the religion major because I was so gung ho about it, not knowing what that meant, just knowing that I was gung ho about it. So that that's how I ended up there. I tried to focus a lot on classes about Christianity. I ended up really enjoying um, classes that were a lot more about Eastern spirituality and things that were less about sacred texts and more about human practice. Um, and also actually about Judaism. So parts where this becomes a big part of my life now is I married a Jewish man and did not go into ministry. Um, but a lot of my life is about being a person who understands and values religion, religious traditions, and how that plays out in people's lives. So I think a big part of it for me was being able to see the whole and its parts. And um, the organization I work for right now, I love a lot, but it's a Catholic social justice organization, which is not my roots. I don't understand Catholicism basically at all. I'm Italian and my family's mostly Catholic, but I was not raised Catholic. So we talk a lot about how people make meaning. And that is a conversation that really that has become very important to me as I planned a wedding a few years ago and as I try to raise a child deeply invested into religious traditions and all the things that that means. Um, Also, when I was a junior, I had a major mental health crisis, the way that that often happens when you're queer and come from a conservative family and those things happen. So um, that's actually why I ended up doing a lot of the coursework for other majors and minors and didn't finish them. And religion held me together and helped make sense of my life in ways that certainly are part of how I interact. Now I do fundraising, so I work with donors and talk a lot about values and what other people value um, and how to live out your values. Uh, but I think that was also really important to me during that time when I was falling apart and coming back together again.
Wow. So the students who are joining us today, along with many of my colleagues in the department, the students, I know that some of them are seniors and are in a situation now of looking at leaving the university and going into jobs. Do you feel like any of you feel like there's something you wish you'd known at that point in terms of, it's your last semester at Emory? Is there anything that you would wish you could go in a little time machine and just whisper to yourself at that moment, aside from winning lottery numbers or that sort of thing?
I do. And for me it would be that I was very upset when I realized I wouldn't end up with the multiple majors that I thought I was going to. And of course, that was a thing that I realized at the very end of everything. And I think I would have told myself, it's okay. I get that this is supposed to be about like why this degree is good for your future. But really it's why the learning and the education is good for your future, and the framing that you get for life. And the journey that you take on your way there, which I don't know, I'm not a like journey matters more than destination person usually. But in this case, it turns out I am. And I was very concerned about it at the time.
At the time, yeah. Anyone else? Blake?
I had thought about this a little bit in advance, and I would definitely echo what Jacqueline just said about the journey and the importance of it. One other thing I think I wish someone had kind of set me down and spoken to me about is all of the pressure to connect. I think that a lot of the people that major in religion oftentimes are interested in questions of meaning. And I was very concerned with finding a job immediately after graduation that satisfied that kind of yearning at a very deep level. And I wish that someone had kind of told me that at 22, right after college, I didn't need to find that ideal job that satisfied all of those needs. And I spent a little time after learning kind of regression analysis and doing something I never thought I would be doing, or kind of moving into finance, then philanthropy. And that's something that I found kind of very deeply enriching and had not at all thought that I would be doing after graduation. And I do think that shifting from a perspective of kind of how do I find myself in the perfect industry or at the perfect firm or something like that, to instead thinking about how can I do something that I feel like gives me a skill set or kind of puts me in conversation with the people that are tackling problems that I'm interested in, would have been a helpful shift of that kind of frame for me, and thinking more about skills acquisition, especially in my early 20s, than necessarily having to check every single box of existential meaning.
Yeah, I also think I put a lot of pressure on myself too, to have like the perfect job or have like the perfect path or everything just planned out. And I think like for me, like even my senior year, like I changed things around a lot. Like I decided to stop being pre-med like my second semester. And so I think the largest thing for me was that it will be okay even if you don't really know what you want to do yet, even when you're graduating, and that even if you haven't found something that you're like super passionate about. And like for me, like I was just interested in a lot of things. And so I think like some of the best advice I got was like just think about like what is something that you want to do first, and just like go from there. And then I think also that like sometimes even if you're just starting something that you're not even like super passionate about, like again, as like Blake was saying, it may lead you to like other things that you are passionate about, or like something that you might even become passionate about in the future. So I think that's like something that I would tell myself.
Students, feel free to kind of say something if you have a thought, if you want to pick up on something. I'm a big proponent of crummy jobs. You learn a lot working in a crummy job. You learn what it's like to work in a crummy job. That's a valuable thing. Any questions at this point? Otherwise, yeah, Pam.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for y'all's insights, and it's exciting to see what all the different choices that people have made, and that the classes that we teach and others teach are ones that resonate. I'm interested in your thoughts on in a way, the transformation, the demographic transformation, if you will, the major transformation of colleges across the country towards the sciences in particular. One of the things we're all reckoning with, and have been for a while, is the way that humanities majors broadly are, shall we say, less attractive, right? And I do think this has to do with getting jobs, and we all have to worry about getting jobs. So I'm not condescending towards that. It's also people want to become doctors or nurses. I was wondering if you had thoughts about that shift. Of course, any one person can be pulled to any particular vocation. So I'm not about talking people out of being doctors or anything like that, but I wondered if you just had thoughts about the way that in colleges broadly, the shift has gone, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, dramatically towards the sciences, even more than towards even law school. So I just wondered what your thoughts might be on that.
So Haley, you were actually you were pre-med, right? So you fit the bill, right? And you went the opposite direction.
Yeah, and I think like that's definitely the case. Like I was very concerned about like what am I gonna do next, like with this degree. But I think like a lot of it was also that I didn't really know a lot about the humanities when I first started, and so like by the time like I think that I actually became more aware of it, I was already like a sophomore and junior. And so I think like one thing, like even just like learning about a lot more about like the humanities earlier on, which I think you do learn because of like your liberal arts like curriculum, but I think just like having more things like this, how we have this together like earlier on would be helpful, because I know like that's like I just didn't know what anthropology was until like I came to college. Or like that religious studies was like something that people could major in. But I think and I think like also like having panels like this that specifically show that the humanities can be tied to other careers is super important too. And I think that would have been something really nice to see.
I'd love to hop on a tangent of that, just in case this resonates with anybody. I didn't know religion was a humanity. I couldn't have told you what a humanity was. My family is full of plenty of smart people, and you all look very smart as well, but we were not academic intellectual types. That was not our deal. And I still, I think I didn't know that religion was technically one of the humanities until, I don't know, a couple years ago, in part because it didn't matter, right? That's just not how I thought about things. I think I entered religion thinking that it was going to teach me about specific religious concepts, which to me sounded very social sciencey at least. But yeah, it's not a direct answer to your question, but in case that resonates with anyone else.
One thing I would just like to add on there too to your question, Dr. Hall, is for the past couple of years prior to Bain, I had founded and have been managing a project controls training company that primarily services federal kind of national nuclear laboratories and other kind of large government contractors. And it's a very technical field, and I don't know much at all about much of the kind of technical elements of it, but I have a team that has a couple trainers and kind of technically sophisticated individuals that provide a lot of the training. And one thing that I really struggled with hiring were people that could write effectively and communicate clearly, and that I could put in front of a client and they would be able to respond empathetically and addressing their needs. And was able to kind of look at, I didn't have trouble training anyone on any of the technical elements. What I really had trouble with was a lot of the kind of communication and writing and critical thinking and analysis. And oftentimes I would get these slides for our client presentation that they've just basically copy and pasted from their Excel sheet. And I would say, well, what's the story that these numbers are telling? And I think that ability is very similar to when I would take a class on early Tibetan Buddhism and would sit down and think this is a language that I don't know at all, and kind of a universe I've never inhabited, sit down and sit with it and learn how to kind of speak in that vocabulary, and then how to kind of write critically about that. And so I would pretty adamantly encourage people to think strongly about the humanities and about developing those skills, because I think that a lot of the technical skills we can gain through other job experiences and things later on, but being able to sit in a seminar room like you and I did, Dr. Hall, and talk about these kind of great books and what they mean and how to communicate in that way, I think is something that I come back to time and time again.
I'm not jumping in here. I'm pausing to allow a moment of thought if anyone likes to reflect. Well, why don't we maybe if you can think of particular examples or moments at which your religion major served you in your professional life. I wonder if that's if you can think of good examples of that, kind of if you have a particular story or a particular moment where it made sense. Or not. Any thoughts there?
I think this is a theme that's come up a couple of times, but and Jacqueline, I talked a lot about talking to people about their values and what's important to them. And that's something that I, as a consultant, frequently do, sitting down with a new client that's very skeptical of us coming in and helping and offering advisory services. And me, the religion major comes into play frequently when you're stepping back thinking, what's really important to this organization? How is it built? What are kind of the touchstones and meaning within it? What does it mean to kind of inhabit this world? And that's something that, to me, the religion major was perfect preparation for, and I see coming into play in that way, even though it's in a much more corporate context than oftentimes the communities that we were looking at while I was at Emory.
Mm-hmm. Jackie, you're dealing with a Catholic charity. Do you speak their language?
I'm trying to think of any specific instances, and I'm struggling to come up with them because what I keep coming back to is I spend a lot of time trying to make our space comfortable because we work with volunteers and we work with kids in 4th to 12th grade, and the vast majority of the people that are around us are not Catholic. Our volunteers mostly aren't Catholic and our kids aren't Catholic. A lot of our kids lately actually are Muslim, uh, mostly because of the neighborhoods that we work in, and a lot of them come from immigrant families and work very differently than my 3rd generation New Jersey Italian family. So I think a lot about that. Most of our donors are Catholic, and the people who founded the organization are Catholic, and very much saw it as their life's work, not specifically in an evangelical way, but as this is what God calls me to do. So I spend a lot of time um, trying to identify and delineate for other people what about the ways that we are doing things are rooted in Catholicism. Almost in a similar way that the way that racism and sexism are the air we breathe, that you have to pull them out. I spend a lot of time trying to decentralize specific religions from
Mm-hmm.
what we do. And that comes up in our job descriptions. It comes up in the days that we take off. We all get Good Friday off because I live in New England and that's what you do. But we have a diverse staff and we serve a diverse community. And having a Jewish partner too, I spend a lot of time talking about how, like, if you get Christmas off, that's cool, but Yom Kippur is not actually like just a chill day that people get to hang out and have off. So that ends up being the stuff that I talk about a lot. And when I was still in Atlanta, I was briefly on a city council founded commission for a job that I was working. And we would start, it was me and a whole bunch of people of color in their 70s. And they started every meeting with a prayer. And that was interesting. And that was an important learning for me, because at the time I was very much someone who was comfortable with that kind of prayer, not in that context, but also had to be very aware of being a young white girl from not Georgia in that space and what that looked like. So I think that too is a sort of roundabout answer to the question, but it's a lot of weighing different things and trying to understand where people are coming from and what they're trying to get to, what they're trying to achieve through what they're doing.
Yeah, I hear it. The getting comfortable with profound difference. I think that's something that comes out of a religious studies major. The differences between two different religions, people in two different religions, are not reducible to mechanics or opinion or something. They're ultimate. And the last thing you want to do is understand the other by just translating it into the me, right? That isn't understanding the other at all. So this keeping the difference different, but then being comfortable with it. I think that's what I'm hearing from you so far. Saeli, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think like I can't think of any like particular examples, but I think like just that sentiment in general is a huge thing is in public health for sure, especially with like maintaining cultural humility and especially in tribal health. Just with understanding the sheer amount of like historical trauma as well, like that is something that is incredibly important, and that ties to cultural humility. And so I think just like that general broad understanding is something that is something that you have to, a framework that you have to work from at all times.
Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by cultural humility?
Yeah, so I think it's basically kind of what we have been talking about, but I think just like approaching it from more basically, a lot of people talk about cultural competency, but that has been critiqued a lot because that kind of tends to check off a lot of boxes and lead to like some assumptions or like stereotypes. So like cultural humility is like working from a perspective where you are not working like it's working to sorry, I'm blanking, but it's working just like from a perspective where that it's like humble, and it's like not necessarily treating I wouldn't even say like it's really like creating like a dichotomy between like other or self or anything like that, but just working from like a place of not only respect, but just like that sense of humbleness, and that like the fact that you don't know things is okay, but that you should be educating yourself on it, everything, including like the historical trauma, and being wary of whatever you are doing and whatever frameworks you're using, and being sure that you are as inclusive and understanding as possible.
Yeah. Particularly important when you're dealing with tribal nations, I imagine.
Yeah,
Or,
especially with,
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, and especially with that, just like understanding like the concept of sovereignty, so that like these are government to government relations, which I think a lot of people don't realize when you're working in these spaces.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. We'll open it up for questions, but with the last question that they provide here, Thank you, Sophia, for providing some suggestions. One of the questions here was, well, actually, we kind of already dealt with this. What do you wish you had known while you were an Emory student? I think some of you touched on that already. So let's open it up to student input. We have, looks like about 8 or so students. That's nice. Any thoughts, comments, or what you'd like to hear more of? Sure, go ahead. Just jump right in.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I'm a senior studying psychology and religion. And I have a question, I guess, particularly for Jacqueline and Blake, but also you, Cindy. I was thinking about what Blake said about kind of like the corporate context and how much is transferable. And I was also thinking about what you said, Jackie, about like your past studies in like women's studies and theater and other subjects. And I wonder, in transitioning from like your college education to your jobs, what is lost of your religious education? Like, what do you wish you had more integrated in your day-to-day life and in your job as well?
I wish I had learned how to be patient. I never learned how to be patient. I was just not a thing that I learned in any context. I'm actually going to step back and let Blake answer that first, and I'm going to think about it.
Jackie, just to clarify, are you saying what do I wish I had learned while I was still a religion major at Emory, or?
No, I mean more like, what did you learn about that you feel like you have not been able to integrate past your studies?
Mhm.
Like, what is lost in the transition to a job?
The first thing that pops into my head is just such a wonderful community to talk through those really big questions with. And that's something that I think I took it for granted a bit at times, that community would always be there, and there would always be people that were intellectually curious and wanting to kind of speak across religious traditions and across kind of philosophies and different ways of life and upbringings. And I think I spent a lot of time as a religion major. I spent a lot of time with kind of Buddhist monasticism and early Christian monastic development, and spent a lot of time writing about people who had built communities. And I wish that I had spent more time thinking about how to practically do that as an adult, and how to carry those kind of communities of meaning and communities that you can practice with throughout my 20s. I think one thing that's really tough about life in America right now for people in their 20s is that you're often expected to move frequently for graduate schools and jobs, and your romantic partner, and it's difficult, I think, to maintain those communities that kind of know who you are and can remind you of kind of where you've come from and where you're going. And so I wish I'd carried a bit more of that kind of respect for that community and appreciation for how rare and kind of sacred that is going forward.
Like, that was really helpful for me because it reminded me of some similar things. In college, I worked a lot because I needed money to live on. And Emory was a great place for me for need-based financial aid, but it is expensive to go to school and live in Atlanta. So to be honest, I deprioritized academics and prioritized that. And so that also served me well. but I still have textbooks that I'm like, man, someday I'm going to really give this the read that it deserves. I swear to God, I've moved, I don't know, 10 times. And I still have these books. And I wish that I had realized then that that was the time that I had to spend. Um, now I've been really lucky that my partner, and especially a specific Jewish social justice community that he was part of before we met, has become a really great place to wonder and be curious and really dig into things out of interest, but also personal exploration. So I feel really lucky in that, but especially in pandemic times and, that whole toddler thing and working and all of the other things, like if I'm going to read anything, it's going to be a boring beach read. I don't care if there's snow on the ground. I'm not diving into those textbooks. And right now they're like marked for maybe when I'm retired. So I really, I wish that I had allowed myself, allowed myself a little bit more of that time because that was the time to do it.
Yeah, I would echo I would echo that 1,000 times, and that was incredibly well. But I remember one time over a weekend when Dr. Wendy Farley had assigned the Constellation of Philosophy by Boethius, and I remember at the time I thought, this is so random, and I have all these other things I need to do on campus, and it's about this person who is kind of down on his luck and had done everything right, but something doesn't go his way, and is trying to make sense of that. And that was a really poor explication of it. I'm sorry to all my professors, but it's a book that I've come back to time and time again at different inevitable kind of life disappointments over the past few years. And it really has been a consolation and a solace and something that I would never have time to read now. And that time is just so, so precious. And so I totally agree with everything Jackie's saying about that.
You never know what you're going to need. There was a time in graduate school when, I was pretty disempowered as a junior graduate student. And here was Walter Capps. I don't know if you know Walter Capps, but a major figure in religious studies at UCSB, later ran for Congress and was elected. And we were in a class and we were observing somebody else. And he said, it kind of reminds me of Docetism. And he sort of glanced at me thinking, oh, nobody knows what Docetism is. And I said, oh yeah, the heresy that said Jesus only seemed to suffer, right? And he was like, I dredged that thing out of my church history class from, 2 decades before. And I thought, yes, I know what Docetism is. So you never know what you're going to fish out of the memory and find useful.
Thank you for those answers.
Comments? Anything?
I have another question. Oh, you can go, Sophie.
No, please, Carly, go ahead. I'll go after.
Well, you guys were talking about your path to finding your jobs, and I was wondering if you're happy in the job you're currently at and what aspects you would look for in a job.
Shall I be moderator? Shall I moderate? Saeli. You're doing a really amazing job. Your job now sounds so awesome.
I think, yeah, I mean, I would say that this job is for sure like really interesting and I've definitely learned a lot. And I think just with having to be working on COVID stuff, like it's all like hands on deck. So like that's definitely like a completely different like work environment to be learning in. And I think, so like right now I am planning on pursuing like a master's, and I do want to switch and work more like in reproductive justice and sexual and reproductive health. So I would say that this is not like where I want to like necessarily be, but I think in terms of like what kind of jobs or what kinds of things I look for like in a job, I think that's such a hard question to answer, because I think it really just depends on like what your interests are, and I think like with just like seeing what kinds of skills are required, what kinds of things you're doing. But I think that like honestly, like I think that's really difficult to gauge until you like interview more and like gauge like what kinds of things that you like too, because I think like early on, like honestly after graduating, I didn't really know like what it was that I did like or what I was like even looking for like in a job. So I think it was just like seeing like based on the experiences like what things I do like. And I think like for me, like I do kind of like more program management things over like statistics or data analysis, and like that was like something that I learned or that I do like working with people and like communications, like that's really important to me. And I really like I really want to work with like specific populations that are in the future, and like that was like something that I was like I would look forward to. But I think it's more just like looking at what opportunities are offered there and like what the environment of like the place is also like, because I think that influences a lot of things and people may not necessarily realize that when they're first starting out.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say some really similar things. I did get a master's in nonprofit organizations. I've done professional certifications that are very exactly up my alley. But the place that I'm in now, I do love where I am. And it took me a couple years to find this place. When I moved to Boston, I was taking the same job, basically the same title, but for a grassroots organization that did community organizing. And I thought that was my dream job. And it was not, because there turned out to be a distinction between um, fully living in my values and professionally working in a place where my whole job and life was living those values. Um, and that was really, it was tough and heartbreaking. I lasted at that job for 18 months. And then the next one for 18 months. And now I've been where I am for almost 5 years. But I've been basically in the same position. I've been doing the same thing. So what I wish I had really had the space to think about at the time was what kind of growth there might be in each position, and what I would be able to learn. I think I had always looked at jobs as how well I could do what they were asking for, rather than are there challenging opportunities, are there pathways, and also are there people that I want to learn from. I couldn't have told you when I took this job in 2016 that some of the most important people in my life, some of my closest friends would be actually Siley people who worked for me as AmeriCorps Vistas, who I adore. But also, a good friend who was the chaplain at my organization who christened my daughter. That was incredibly important to me, and those were the people that were there. I didn't know they were going to be the people that were there, but I knew that we work with disadvantaged kids, and the way the people in this organization talk about the kids is that the kids are gold and the community and our society has done them wrong, and we're working to fix that by serving the kids. That is not how every nonprofit sees the people they serve. So that's been a really big deal for me, and I think that's why I love where I am and why I love the people where I am, is because they have that vision, they have that framing, which is really important to me.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you both said. I think that's so insightful and something that I would have totally brushed off when I was in college, that we don't know what we really want to do later. And rather than being kind of paralyzed by that indecision and uncertainty, I would say jump into something and just try it, because I think of a lot of career development, especially in your 20s, as you have a certain kind of thesis or hypothesis, and you should test it by going out and kind of finding the best approximation that you can, and then continue refining from there. And so I guess this goes back to me saying not to put too much pressure on your first job out, but to kind of dive into that work. And like what Jackie was talking about with the community organizing, you might think in the abstract, I know exactly what I want that to be, but then when you get to that place, it could feel different than you imagined, and giving yourself the kind of grace and freedom to then wade into that and then say, no, this isn't exactly what I envisioned it being, and kind of recalibrating from there. And then the second thing I would say is that I think that what I thought I wanted out of my life at 22 is very different than what I now approaching 30 am kind of wanting out of my life. And I think thinking about the ways that your desires kind of transform and change and grow as your life expands in different ways. Thinking about a career that kind of expands with you in that way. And that might be something, like my partner's a medical resident and works at all different hours of the day and in the evening. And it really means a lot to me to be able to go have lunch with her on a random Tuesday. And so finding a job where you can do that and we can sit down and kind of catch up after not seeing each other for 48 hours is really important now, and not something that I ever thought would be really important when I was a lot younger. And I think it's okay for those desires to kind of grow and to give yourself the space to realize and acknowledge what those are, instead of saying, no, when I was, at a certain life stage, I want to do this, so I'm going to kind of force fit this. I think that it's okay to kind of step back and let that evolve.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I love this idea of career discernment as like testing out a hypothesis and seeing what you like and don't like about a particular path. And I'd love to hear from each of you how you actually went about finding those pathways. How did you get connected to different opportunities right after college and in different stages throughout your professional journey?
I can always answer. Mine's super boring though. There's no exciting answer from me. Once upon a time, there was a website called opportunityknocks.org where all of Atlanta's nonprofits posted all of their jobs. I hear that it still exists, but it's now called Work for Good or something. Up here, it's idealist.org. That's literally where I found every job. I am a chatty and friendly person, I believe, but no, never. I've never found a job through personal connections. I have found incredible opportunities in the jobs that I was already in. And there is a lot to be said for having a mentor and a supervisor who believes in you and wants you to grow. But yeah, my answer is short. I looked on the internet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think for me, like I started off with AmeriCorps, and at first, I had applied to a lot of different, or not a lot, I didn't apply to as many as I should have, but I applied to like some jobs and like some different fellowships, and I think I honestly like got rejected from most of them. And so like for me, like I did AmeriCorps because well, one, for public health, it is kind of difficult to get a lot of experience straight out of college with just a bachelor's. I think most people working in the field like usually do require a year or two at least of experience. And that also like public health is encompasses like a lot of different fields. So there's like a lot of different, if you're doing like more epidemiology, that would require a different background versus like other things. But I think with AmeriCorps offered a lot of they have a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different programs, and so like I did Vista because that one focused more on capacity building, and so I was like more interested in learning how to how public health operates like more at a local community levels. And so I thought that would be like a good way to get some experience. And so that's how I started off with that. And then from there, because I had started off in tribal health, I kind of continued along with tribal health. And so because of the pandemic, well, then they had like a lot more grants and like jobs in this area. And so like that's kind of how I got into this specific area. But there's a lot of different job boards with public health. And so there's like the American Public Health Association, and they have a lot of job boards. I think for this one, I had like looked on LinkedIn. And then I know like the CDC was also posting a lot of jobs like regarding that. And I know like a lot of smaller organizations also, I just like looked online at different job boards and just like searched more specifically that way. And then I also like I think talked to some people that were at Rollins at the public health school and asked them about like some opportunities that, or like what information they had on job boards and things like that. Because like the Emory Rollins career page also has a lot of job listings there.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of finding people who you think, oh, I'd like to have a job in 5 or 10. And I would often hound them to go with me or something like that and hear about what they did and kind of different kind of intermediate steps along the way, and hearing about their stories, and then kind of discerning in that way. And then and that kind of hit or miss. And I'm sure there's kind of half of Atlanta while I was at the Woodruff Foundation that cringes whenever they see my email in their inbox. But I found that to be a really helpful way of, seeing what do you like about your job, what do you not like about your job, and kind of living in the same way that you read a novel and get to live a different life, kind of hearing about their experiences. And then another thing that I've found really helpful is having a team of, I guess, 4 or 5 mentors that whenever a big life decision is coming up or transition, I'll oftentimes reach out to and have a few email threads going about that next step. And that's been something that's going to help keep me accountable to my values as well, and continuing to kind of live them through each iterative stage.
Sophia, there was a list you sent me of kind of, it was about 6 or so kind of useful links that have to do with career and so on. Is there an easy way you could, I don't know, put that file in the chat or something, make that available?
Absolutely. I was actually just going to bring that up. So thank you. I'm going to put some resources in the chat for different places where you can connect with Emory alums and have some of those conversations that Blake was talking about. There's also a platform for local opportunities and jobs and internships on Handshake. So I'll put all those resources in the chat, and I think it would be great for everybody to check them out, no matter what stage you are in your own career discernment process. And if you have any questions after looking through the resources, please feel free to get in touch. We'll be happy to put you in contact with the right person or resource you need for your job search process.
I like the way you keep using the word discernment. That word has a certain a special meaning in certain churches where you're discerning whether you should become a pastor, say, and it's this long process of introspection, so on. Other comments, questions from students or anyone?
I think Michael sent a message through the chat.
Yeah, I guess you probably see this. You can see this in the chat. This is us being entirely selfish here. It's like we need some help. So what advice would you give us, namely the current religion department faculty, in terms of what topics we should ensure majors cover during their time in the department, what we should emphasize more or less? Any thoughts on that? And this could apply to our graduates, but actually also to our current students as well. What do you think we should have done a bit more of? I would say better to be positive. So don't tell us what we should have done less of. Okay, so maybe skip that part.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
I don't know if this is at all possible, but I think just like with comparing like my religion major to like anthropology and biology, and I think like even other majors, like I think there's more room to take more classes that are just like religion specific. Like I know we have like the 2 seminars like in the major, but I think like after that most classes are kind of more open to like everyone else. So I think it was like kind of harder to have like more deeper and specific conversations. So I don't know if that's like something to consider.
When I started teaching 300 a few years ago, I immediately saw that this was a different crowd from, you know, where in a class of 20, there might be a couple of religion majors. But when you get all religion majors, you can just jump straight to get straight to the point.
I'm trying to remember what class it was that we were encouraged to visit other houses of worship that were not ones that we were familiar with. And I have such mixed feelings about it now. Being more aware of like religious voyeurism and tendencies of white Christian people to do such things. But I remember getting a lot out of those experiences, and out of meeting people who were practicing their religions in whatever way they were going to practice their religions. I reflect a lot on a modernization of Judaism class that I took sometime in my junior year, and have specific memories of things that guest speakers said. And I wish I had at the time thought to keep connected to those people. I think they would have been open to it. But I think, as with most things in the world, having the relationships with people, and being encouraged to do so, which, to be honest, you guys may have done that at the time. I was not the most diligent student. But that's something that I found especially useful, that I would have liked to do more of, whether it was encouraged or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to the specifics as well. And I do think the courses that had a regular cadence of heavy reading and then a kind of quick papers that were a few pages that you had to submit on a weekly basis and be prepared to present and discuss has been something that, from a career standpoint, has been really, really helpful and has been a competitive advantage in some ways from like science majors or something that might have just had labs or something like that, because that's something that no matter what job you have, you'll receive an influx of information and have to make a decision based on it or offer analysis. And then at a more subject matter level, putting religion in conversation with other disciplines and placing people in a room who are from various disciplines is something that I think is really, really helpful. And even reaching across schools to the business school or medicine or law, and I think that's the benefits of being at such a great liberal arts college, where you have these strong departments across and can build that out.
Pam.
Yeah, this has less to do with the major than with the undergraduate studies altogether. Is there any, looking back, it may be that y'all are kept in touch with people at Emory, you know, even since you left. Is there any advice that you would offer to Emory College? that would be a no. Just
one I don't want to speak too much. If anyone else has anything to say, jump in. But one thing that I feel like sometimes Emory is a bit kind of hesitant to tout its own horn or to celebrate so much of the that is there, and I even think that it has its kind of unique strengths as well, with being all the work that it does in public health and being situated in the city of Atlanta. That's something that I've resourced that I think it's kind of fully discovering and living into in a lot of ways and claiming. And I guess I just think that Emory has this wonderful kind of brand and identity that it oftentimes doesn't necessarily fully express, or even kind of apologizes for the humanities at times, rather than saying, no, you're actually going to get this amazingly world-class kind of humanities education. We're going to put you in conversation with the leaders on the front lines of public and business and elsewhere. It's a pretty unique experience that would be very hard to replicate at other institutions. And I don't think there's a need for, especially the humanities at Emory, to shy away from that.
thank you.
I'm reflecting on something that I know was very useful for me. I get the impression that it's not necessarily everybody's experience, but my connection to Emory is not as much to the institution as development folks probably would wish it was. But I return to Emory all the time for various reasons, but I feel like I had a lot of important things at Emory. I said before, I worked for the Wheel. I had also worked for Theater Emory. I also was a Duck student manager back when that existed. The Duck was the student center back in the day, you guys. But those were all really important things to me, and they were in no way integrated. We once upon a time had a journalism program. It wasn't as good as the Wheel was. So I didn't feel a lot of integration between those different parts of my Emory experience, except through Dr. Reinders, because I was the editorials editor and he wrote the occasional editorial, or things like that, that would sort of, things came together a little bit more when there were times where I could use things that I was learning in a class or framing in a class. This happened a lot with Wheel stuff and women's studies classes too. Those are the things that I remember the most. Those are the things that actually got me published outside of Emory. Those are the things that feel really formative, and those are the things that make me feel connected. So I don't know if there's a way to institutionalize that, but I think it is what made the biggest impact on me.
Yeah, in terms of my contributions to the Wheel, I think you're probably referring to my long-standing campaign to pressure Sodexo, I think it was,
Yes.
to give those cashiers in Cox Hall a stool to sit on so they wouldn't have to stand all for hours on end.
It was the best. But it was
who could have predicted that getting an op-ed published in the Wheel would have no discernible effect on reality?
I know, it's shocking. I mean, I published a couple hundred in the Wheel, and I don't think anything really happened. However, it was important to me.
Yeah, no, yeah.
They still don't have stools.
No, I don't think they do. They
Yeah,
have mats to stand on, rubber mats, which is better than nothing, but oh well.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
This is to say, do I understand you right that you're saying in some ways that you wish there would have been more structure to the major, or were you putting that more a positive spin on that? I couldn't quite tell.
I wouldn't say that I would want more structure, because I think that is like a strong suit that there isn't as much structure, because I think that gives you a chance to explore what you want, whereas other majors don't allow for that. And so I think that definitely let me take a lot of interdisciplinary courses, which I would have been able to explore otherwise. But I think I just really enjoyed like the conversations in like the 2 seminar classes like the most, I think, or not. Well, I think I enjoyed it a lot more intellectually like than other conversations in other classes. And so I think just like that level of depth is harder to find in classes where not everyone is on the same page with when you haven't taken like all the other courses in like religious studies, and you don't have like a understanding of like the theory or anything like that. So I think it's just like I don't know if there's any way to bring that depth to like other courses too. And so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
We're currently in an ongoing way thinking and rethinking about 300 and 490, those 2 seminar courses. And I'm moving towards probably something that relates to some of what you're saying, which is sort of trying to find ways of diversifying your voice. So Blake, exactly what you're talking about. In other words, not just the academic term paper, certainly would include that, but it would also want to get students in that class to think about, you know, how to write an op-ed page, or how to kind of speak in different registers, so that you can increase the range of ways that you have to speak about religion. That's the theory anyway.
Yeah, I think that would be that's something that I personally would find really exciting, because oftentimes I've wanted to maintain different ties to, there are a few kind of religious publications and more popular publications that I submit to on like essays from time to time, and like Jackie said, I contributed to the Wheel at different times, and I think places like that I'm probably not going to step back and do religious scholarship again and sometime over the next couple of years, but to know how to, you know, pitch ideas at that level or speak across communities on, you know, a briefing paper for a member of Congress or something like that, to speak to those different audiences would be really, really helpful. And that's we've talked about kind of transferable skills as well. And that's something that someone will be doing throughout their career afterwards too.
Yeah. You guys who are actually, I realize we don't all know each other here. Why don't we just let the people who haven't spoken yet say hello, because there's a couple of people that are not so familiar. Blake, I don't think you were ever in one of my classes. Is that right?
I don't think so. I feel like we met on campus maybe a time or two. I did most of my coursework in early Christianity and looking at different monastic movements and kind of Christian mysticism, as well as Tibetan Buddhism. And I wrote my senior thesis looking at experimental monastic communities, doing an ethnography. And so Dr. Berger actually had really helped me with a lot of my research methods in the 490 class.
Your description there, I felt like, wow, that sounds like an Emory University religion major.
Yep.
But maybe the chair of the department might like to say hello, because probably not familiar to some of you anyway.
Yeah, to most. The one person whom I know, Jonathan, I guess had to leave. So bye-bye, Jonathan. Yeah. He was here. I don't know, you don't know me. I don't know you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be listening to your input about your career paths and how they relate to the study of religion. My name is Maria Mercedes Carrion. I have been at Emory 25 years, but in religion, I've only been for 3 years. I tried to get in 10 years ago, but it was not meant to be. So time is really one of those things that ties my being with religion and studying religion and teaching religion. I was just doing it someplace else at Emory. It's really wonderful to be here, and I'm hoping that that others will keep asking questions. Those who have not spoken, perhaps Amin and Isabel and Amber. It would be great to hear. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna mull your name, Guisali. Yeah. So
Wesley.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be great to hear from all of you.
Oh, hello, I'm Amin. I'm double major in computer science and religion. So I just joined today just to learn about how we can just find a way to use this combination, because it's something new for me, because computer science is not related to religion at all. But so I'm still thinking how can I just use that for my future career and just learn new things, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Isabel?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Isabel. I actually graduated in May 2020, but I got the email through the alumni. I was just interested in learning more about religion, related careers, because I took a few religion classes at Emory. I think I took Dr. McClintock's and Dr. Wu's East Asian Buddhism class. And yeah, so thank you for sharing all your advice and insight on careers, because I'm still trying to figure it out. So yeah.
Are you currently doing something related to religion, or?
No, I'm actually working in accounting right now for a healthcare company, but I'm trying to figure out how to switch to something I'm more interested in. Like you guys said, it's good to work in a crummy job, and yeah, that's right now. So yeah.
Can I hop in for a real quick second?
Yeah.
I graduated in 2006, and that was the last really excellent economy we had. So that was lucky for me.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the reason I got my first job out of college was because I had been a student manager at the Duck and because I had management experience. I think the specific people who hired me thought it was intriguing that I was a religion major. And that's great. And clearly it served me well. That's not why I got that job, or I think any of the other jobs I've ever had. It wasn't what they were looking for, but it was what made me the employee they were looking for. So if it's the thing that you want to look at, if you want to do something that's specifically religion related, awesome. And I hope you find that. But don't discount the fact that everything else you learned at Emory and everything else you learn on your way is also how you get there. I definitely thought that what major I picked was supposed to be the biggest deal. It was among the deals. It was not the biggest.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, let's see, Sophia, what do you think? Do we have any last thoughts? We're really proud of you, actually. I think we should say that when we learn about what you've done, and we tend to be a little bit more in touch with those who've gone on to graduate school because they're pestering us for letters of reference, so at least we're aware of that. But when we learn about these amazing things, it's very inspiring. I feel like we're so proud to have been part of a time of your life when you're putting things together in a formative way. At least that was my undergraduate period as well, a time when I kind of decided who I was or figured out who I wanted to be. And so that's why I love undergraduate education. Sorry, Sophia, do you want to add anything? You put
Just want
some,
to echo your thanks to the panelists for joining us and sharing their stories with us. If anybody would like to check out any of those resources I linked to in the chat, please do so. And if you have any follow-up questions, you should have gotten my email when you registered for the event. So please stay in touch. And this was such a terrific conversation, and we're just really grateful for the gift of your time and attention, the panelists and faculty who joined us. So thank you all so much.
And in the name of all the faculty in religion, we're here. We're exactly where you left us, although offices may change. We've been threatened with restacking, trying to understand what that means in many different terms. But we're here. Please get back in touch with us anytime. We would love to hear from you, and we're ready to work with you, even if you have left. It's really wonderful to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone
Good to see
also.
everybody. Be well.
I would like to also thank you for coming and extend the same invitation if anyone wants to reach out, like Isabel or anyone, former students. I'll also just say that, you know, I'm a professor in the Department of Religion. I have a PhD in religion, but when I was an undergraduate, I didn't take a single course in religion, and I even didn't understand why anyone would. So, you know, we have our paths and they do evolve, and you just never quite know where you're going, but I keep open mind. I take the message I take from the three speakers is keep an open mind to what's going to manifest for you, and don't be afraid to make a change in course as time goes on. It was really nice to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
all
Thanks.
right. I'll stick around a little
Good
bit.
night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.